Episode of the InNOLEvation Mindset Podcast, powered by the Moran College of Entrepreneurship. Hey, I am Mark McNees, your host, and today we are joined in virtual studio by the founder of Solar and Energy Loan Fund, and it's known as SELF, and his name is Doug Howard. Hey, Doug, thanks for coming in today. Looking forward to this conversation.
Greetings, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Heard a lot about what you've been doing and the expansion for our listeners. Can you tell us how you started Self? What was the mission behind it? And just give us an arc of what you've been doing and how you've been growing.
Sure. I started out my career in environmental planning and land conservation and got a wild hair for political office in 1998. It was during a 12-year term commission that we got very involved in energy issues. It was a big push to build new plants of all sorts, including one of the largest coal plants in America proposed in western St. Lucie County. And I was adamantly opposed to that. We live in the Sunshine State. We don't have coal in the state. The idea of train loads of coal down from Appalachia through Georgia and Florida into our community to burn and then drop all kinds of heavy metals out all over the community made absolutely no sense. And it was during that process that we unanimously denied the coal plant. But I also went to FPL and I asked them, please do a solar demonstration project with us in St. Lucie. We're in the Sunshine State. And I was extremely disappointed in the answer that I got from the president of FPL at the time. He told me, Commissioner, you give me my project, I'll think about helping. And I left that meeting with steam coming out of my ears, thinking to myself, I have to go to an energy monopoly, ask for their permission to do what's right for my community. And because of the way the energy laws are set up, we didn't have the ability to make that choice. We had to convince them to do what was right for our community. So it was out of pure frustration that I started to look deeper at what could I do as a local elected official to try and kickstart the clean energy economy from the bottom up without having to get support from politicians and utilities, but simply to do the right. And so this was about 2008, 2009. President Obama rolled out the ARA program, the stimulus program, and included within that were special grants that were available through the Department of Energy. And we noticed that one of them was for the creation of innovative local clean energy financing programs. And the light bulbs just went off in my brain. I thought, well, this is our opportunity. Let's create a local financing entity that could help people overcome the high cost of investing in these technologies so that they could take advantage of these proven technologies and savings and all the benefits therein. So we were very fortunate to have been selected as one of 20 states and or entities that received seed funding back in 2009. And St. Lucie County created the nonprofit Solar and Energy Loan Fund, or SELF, and then spun us off as an independent 501c3 nonprofit who would then initially administer the grant and then do our best to try and scale and sustain the program long term. So our 15-year journey has taken us from a pilot program in St. Lucie County that we officially started in 2010 to subsequently spreading across the region and the state, then the southeast United States. And we're currently finalizing partnerships with other green banks and community development financial institutions, CDFIs. And we're basically franchising the model to bring climate equity lending to other states across the country. We're finalizing 13 partnerships and opening up 17 states in the District of Columbia so that we can bring our financing programs to these states in the immediate future.
Well, it's really interesting. And congratulations on just your expansion and your impact. I know it's been huge here in Florida, and it's really exciting to see that it's scaling throughout the nation. So congratulations on that. For our listeners and for me, could you explain the difference between what self does and say a bank like Climate First Bank?
Sure, there are similarities and distinctions. I have the utmost respect for Ken LaRoe, who is the founder of First Bank. I think his first bank he created in Orlando was First Green Bank. I'm not sure.
I believe that is correct.
Yeah, but I want to give him a shout out just for his leadership, his wisdom, his foresight in creating this entity. They are a for profit and they actually take deposits and are more of a traditional bank, but they're focusing on trying to advance clean energy and do a great job. Self is a nonprofit organization. And really, what we focus on is trying to help working class people obtain access to low cost financing so that they can make a variety of what I would describe as sustainable building improvements, including energy efficiency, resilience, as well as clean energy. But distinction is really the underwriting methodology. Our underwriting, like most traditional financing and first, is not based on your credit score. And this is a really critical issue as we are debating strategies and laying out ways to try and advance sustainability for all or solar for all. Half of Americans were denied loans last year because they didn't have adequate credit scores. So we've seen a tremendous growth in the clean energy sector, but most of those projects are happening in affluent communities and are being done by white companies. 93% of all the projects done, solar projects done in America, were done by white-owned companies. So it's been an exclusive club. And what our organization is trying to do is break those financial and technical barriers to enable working class families access funding at low cost and then be able to also take advantage of these proven technologies and the savings. So the biggest distinction would really be our focus on climate equity
Mhm.
and really focusing on low and moderate communities. And just as a case in point here, we've done $58 million of projects, helped over 12,000 people, and 70% of our projects have been for people categorized as low and moderate income. So most of the green banks in America that are financing these projects are doing a great job, but their penetration rate into lower and moderate income communities is typically below 15 or 20%. So we're nearly three, if not four times the national average in terms of our ability to penetrate working class communities and help retirees on fixed income, single mothers, U.S. veterans, disabled homeowners, people with low or no credit scores gain access to and be able to invest in these technologies. One of the things that's been very rewarding is the fact that we've not only done $58 million of projects, but our default rates have been at or below 2% over most of that 15-year history. So we're outperforming banks and doing so in what are perceived as riskier lending environments. And what we have shown is that these folks are absolutely credit worthy. And so we're not just trying to advance financing, we're trying to do this prudently as well.
Interesting. Politically, you've been through some major transitions in policy and things like that. As you
Yep.
mentioned, you received a grant under the Obama administration, and then we had the Trump administration, and then we had the Biden administration, who brought in the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, which had a lot of sustainable dollars baked into that act. And then, as we're all aware, President Trump is now in office has and had the one big beautiful bill passed in law, which really defunded, at least my understanding, defunded a lot of green energy initiatives. How has that roller coaster been for self?
Yeah.
I don't want to get it really too political, but I'd like to know how it has impacted you and your organization and your customers.
It's certainly been chaotic, no doubt about that. But if I reflect back on our 15 plus year history here in Florida, we've been swimming upstream from day one. Many of our green bank counterparts in the states get huge support from their states and utilities. To give you a case of one of my favorite green banks and probably the most successful green bank in America would be the Connecticut. They have been so innovative. They've been so ahead of their time, over $1 billion of projects. In comparison to us, they have received $400 million of support from their state utility over their 14 or so year history. We have received zero from our state. So we have laid out a path that does not require the support of the state and utilities. We like to work with them if they will work with us, but we don't want to set up a nonprofit that's dependent on them in order for us to survive. And we're somewhat of a unique nonprofit. We are a 501c3. We're also certified by the U.S. Treasury Department as a community development financial institution, but we're not a charitable organization giving money away. What we're doing is providing people access to low cost capital, typically saving people 15 or even 20% of their interest rates, helping people get access to money who couldn't otherwise do so. Our mission is a public benefit, but as a part of our lending activity, we do derive some modest fees and a little bit of a spread on the loan, which is the difference between what the cost of capital is from our investors versus the price of that or the interest rate that hits the streets. Those earned revenues help us sustain the organization. So we're trying to deploy an entrepreneurial strategy in the profit sector so that we are not reliant on government grants to survive. So to your specific question about the historic climate bill that was included in the Inflation Reduction Act, that was $20+ billion that was to be divvied out amongst green banks across the country, including our own, to basically supercharge the work that we're doing. Most of those were really grant dollars that were pass-throughs that would have ended up benefiting very low income people within the state. So it's not as if those resources were necessarily coming to us, but more through us as administrators to deploy those funds. And our mentality has really been we were thriving before this historic legislation, and we're going to continue to thrive with or without it forward. The demand for the products and service that we provide is overwhelming. The essence of what we're doing is helping low and moderate income across the country access low cost financing to make really fundamental repairs and upgrades to existing affordable housing. And I think just last week, the Washington Post had an article about the housing stock in America and noted that the average age of the home in America is now 40 years old and crumbling. So we need, in my opinion, we need to focus beyond just solar, which is a part of the solution, and look more comprehensively and holistically at the needs within underserved across the country. They have AC systems that are outdated, not working, got roofs falling, they've got old jalousie windows. There are really fundamental repairs that need to be made to those homes to make them more energy efficient, more storm resilient, and make them solar ready once all those other steps have been taken. But I think there's a misconception. Somebody who has a $400 or $500 utility bill, if you just slap on solar panels, you're going to solve that problem. And from our perspective, solar is the most expensive last step, and that it's really much more cost effective and smarter to take care of energy efficiency, reduce your energy use by 25, 30% typically just for putting high efficiency AC and basic weatherization, lower your energy use, get the roof solar ready, and then build a solar system based on the reduced demand for energy with the house.
I have a friend who was the CEO. He's recently retired of Danfoss Turbocore. They make compressors for like train and big units like that. Their compressors don't use any oil. They use magnetic. And one of their largest growth has been in the data centers and AI with heat exchangers and their compressors. And he likes to say that the cheapest energy is the energy you never use.
Right.
And I think that's what you're talking about is these improvements of better windows and better insulation and things like that is
Yeah.
actually a big part of the equation.
Yeah, I strongly agree with you, Mark. When we initially started this program with DOE, we really had a laser focus on energy efficiency, and we did a lot of high efficiency AC installations. And we did pre and post testing so that we knew with certainty what the outcome was. We did, I think, over 2,000 home energy assessments after the fact to make sure that our clients were actually getting a return on that investment that we anticipated. And we saw overwhelmingly that people were achieving 20, 25, even 30% reduction just with those basic repairs. And you can imagine if you've got a $300-$400 utility bill and you're able to cut that by 25 or 30%, that's a pretty meaningful amount of savings that oftentimes can be used to actually help pay for the initial investment. You're using the savings to
Right.
actually pay off the loan. And I think that's one of the things that I would really wish the state would have a better perspective. If you look at the EIA information, it's showing that Florida is buying about, last time I looked, it was like 60, billion dollars a year that we're spending buying carbon-based fuels from other countries and other states to fuel our economy. That's an outflow of 60 billion a year that could be reinvested back into Florida to grow our own economy and create jobs and industries. And I think it's a huge missed opportunity for us to be so reliant on natural gas and oil and other carbon-based fuels when we have the sun, it's cost effective, and we have the ability to invest in Florida rather than driving somebody else's economy. And if I can just elaborate on that thought, we tend to focus on the 12,000 plus people that we've helped through this program. That's our main focus. But at the same time, we've also created $58 million of economic development activity for more than 1,000 contractors that participate in our network. And I think of the local mom and pop AC company that joined our network 10 or more years ago. We've now done over $1 million of financing for that one company. So I think of ourselves as a clean economic engine, right? We're not only creating positive impact in the community for people, we're also helping advance clean energy and green jobs within the states that we're working as well.
It's really interesting. So when you think about, it's interesting because you're started in Florida. I believe your first project was in St. Petersburg,
St.
Florida. Is that
St. Lucie County is where we started. St. Petersburg was our first local government partnership where they actually gave us seed funding to create our first satellite office. And that was probably around 2017-ish, roughly. And to cut you up, if I can elaborate on that partnership, they had just received funds from the BP oil spill, and they wanted to use that money to try and advance clean energy. They were not fans of PACE, which is another type of green financing program. Fortunately, has numerous problems associated with it, particularly consumer protection or lack thereof. But nonetheless, the city reached out and said, hey, we'd really like to have self expand to St. Pete, County. And they provided us with a $300,000 seed grant over a 3-year time frame so that we could hire a full-time program manager. And then what we did is use our network of investors nationally to then raise $3 million in low-cost loan capital, which we deployed in the city within the first 3 or 4 years. And so it was I think, a highly successful partnership because they were able to leverage their initial seed funding nearly 10 to 1 in the first 3 years, bring in an outside organization that had a proven track record, had resources in hand, would do all the work for them, and take all the risk. There was no taxpayer money put at risk in that program. And then, as I'd noted earlier in the conversation, because we're generating revenues from our lending activity, once we're able to get to a certain economy of scale, we can actually sustain that program in that region after the grant has expired. And that's exactly what's happened. So now fast forward 4 more years since the grant expired, and we're still fully operational in St. Pete. We're still doing millions of dollars in projects, and the earned revenues coming from that lending activity is providing sufficient revenue for us to be able to continue to pay for that program manager to sustain the program. So I think we've now done probably 5 or 6 million easily in Pinellas County. And so our leveraging ratio and our results are just continuing to increase over time. So we've had a great relationship with St. Pete, Hillsborough County, and others in the Gulf Coast region. I think we have a good 250 contractors from that region alone who are using our financing to plug financial holes, help local people, but then grow their business in the process.
That's fantastic. I was at a conference in St. Pete just last week, and I believe it was the city manager actually referenced the partnership that they had with you as a win for the city that is still paying dividends. They put this initial seed money in, and
Yep.
it's still paying off.
It's
Kind of
great to hear. Yeah.
full circle there that they treasure what you built and what you brought to St. Pete. It was me being a fan of what you're doing. It was fun to sit there in the audience.
Yeah, and I've got to give a shout out to former Mayor Kreisman and
Mhm.
also former City Commissioner Dart Price. Both of them played a really critical role, and Commissioner Gabbard has also been a huge supporter of ours, amongst others. Former Commissioner Carl Nurse. There was multiple people that really made this happen in St. Pete. So we were honored to have them reach out. We were honored to work with them, and we're really proud of the results that we've had there and our continuing impacts we're continuing to create.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, but you mentioned pace, and me personally, I don't know a lot about pace, but I thought that it potentially had a lot of upside. But I do
Yeah.
understand, because it goes on your tax bill and there's some liability there. Can you unpack a little bit more
Sure.
about PACE, and can we talk about some of the good parts about PACE and then some of
Sure.
the challenging parts about PACE?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
could you explain to the audience what PACE is?
Yeah, PACE is an acronym that stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. And it was one of the first green financing programs developed in the country. And I share your opinion that I was initially quite intrigued with it. I have to admit, I didn't fully understand it. I was first looking into it. I remember talking with our county attorney about PACE, and he said, "You realize that PACE is not a." Looked at him like, "What? What do you mean? People are borrowing money, but they're essentially using the equity of their property to secure the financing, and then they're paying the loan off as a part of their tax bill. It's
Right.
like a non-ad valorem addition on the tax bill. But this is a really important distinction because it's not considered a loan. People do not have to go through a normal credit check, and you don't have to show your ability to pay. And this is a secured lending product, unlike our loans, which are unsecured and not attached to the property. So if you were to take on a PACE loan for an air conditioner and it gets added to your tax bill, so the next year when your tax bill has, you now have your normal taxes and then you have this PACE assessment. If you can't pay your tax bill, you're jeopardizing your home ownership. Said otherwise, you could lose your house over an AC loan, which is absurd. So it's a highly dangerous product. It can be good, but the problem is that it's being sold by the contractors in the field who don't even understand it. I'll give you an example. I had one of our contractors call, and we initially dabbled in PACE a little bit. We've since gotten rid of it, but we had a contractor who was working with PACE in another county, and we had set up special extra underwriting and consumer protections for PACE that required it to be handled like a loan. You had to go through a financial background check and you had to prove your ability to. And he was complaining to me that this is taking too long. I need instant approvals. All the other PACE companies give me instant approvals. And I said to him, I said, "Sir, do you know what happens if your client defaults on this assessment?" Long pregnant pause. He had no idea. And I
Mhm.
said, "Sir, they can lose their house." And he didn't even know that. So here's the contractor in the field using PACE financing. He's the one who's pitching it to the homeowner, yet he himself didn't even understand the severe pitfalls of it if it goes wrong. So I would break PACE into two general categories for simplicity. There's commercial PACE, which I think has a lot of potential and is being used successfully on large projects with professionals at the table who understand it, scrutinize it, and it can be a useful tool. In the residential sector, you have California, Florida, and I believe it was Missouri, 3 out of the 50 states that had residential PACE. Missouri has since closed their program down. California shut it down, but then reopened it with all kinds of new provisions, consumer protections. And then Florida is basically considered the Wild West, is that Florida still has active residential PACE. Much of that is happening in South Florida. I think Miami-Dade County, I thought I recently read that they had about 2/3 of all the PACE projects are in Miami-Dade County. There's just not a lot of oversight going on programs. I think it was in Southwest Florida, Collier County did an audit of the PACE programs after the first year, and the vast majority of the projects didn't even meet basic guidelines as set forth in the state legislation. So it's just been really problematic because it's been so abused, and the fact that it has such detrimental effects if it goes bad. It's almost like a nuclear power plant. Oh, it's clean and great. It's easy to do this. But if it goes bad, like Fukushima, it goes
Yeah.
really bad. And I've had property owners call me who have taken out PACE loans in other counties and literally crying, saying, I'm going to lose my house. What can I do? In contrast to PACE, Self is offering unsecured personal loan. If an individual defaults on our loans, the first thing we're going to do is try and figure out a path for them to get back on their feet. And a good example of that was COVID, and there were widespread job losses, impacts on people, and we had a $20+ million of outstanding loans and hundreds of low and moderate income frontline workers who were taking loans from us. So we knew that we needed to take some extraordinary steps to help. So we wrote to all of our clients and said, if you have been affected financially by COVID, we're going to provide a 90-day grace period so that you can get yourself back on your feet. And we had dozens of existing clients take us up on that. We gave them this grace period, and every single one of them was able to get back on their feet and then continue their payments without being pushed into default. In the worst case scenario, we do have some people who take out a loan and have no intention of ever paying it. And if someone does that, we do have the ability to go to small claims court and get a judgment of up to $5,000, but the home itself is never in jeopardy. It's a really critical issue, and something that the Solar and Energy Loan Fund prides ourselves on. We're not just trying to promote clean energy, we're trying to do this prudently. We're not pushing loans on people who can't afford it. It doesn't help them, it doesn't help us. And we have dozens of investors from all over North America, including about half of our investors are faith-based organizations. We have never defaulted on a single investment in our 15-year history. So the integrity of what we're doing is paramount. We were trying to do this right.
That's really fantastic. That's interesting, the growth in faith communities. What's your take on that? Like, why is that happening?
Well, one of the main reasons for that was former Pope Francis, who issued encyclical on climate change and also on impact investing. And the result of that was many of the Catholic organizations across the country took their money out of the stock market and stopped promoting Halliburton Mobil Oil and looked for alternative investment strategies like Self, where they could invest their money. They might have to forego a little bit of yield. In other words, instead of making 7%, they might make 3% or 4%. But in the process, they're actually advancing the mission of the church and impacts to the very communities that they're trying to help. And so there is a literal $1 trillion impact investing world out there. And one of the biggest strengths of our nonprofit mission-driven lending organization is our ability to attract those dollars to our organization at low cost so that we can then relend that money at well below market rate. Our lowest interest rate for an unsecured loan is 5% fixed, and that's for somebody with poor credit. Now, typically, if that person did have another alternative, it would likely be a credit card at 25 to 30%. So
Right.
not only are we providing people with access to money, we're typically saving them 15, 20, or even 25% on their interest rates. And the other beautiful thing is we report our loans to the credit bureau. So as individuals are paying off their loans with us, they're actually building their credit score and therefore opening up new opportunities in the future. So not just gaining access to the money and the benefits of the investments they're making in their house, they're also building home equity, generational wealth, and improving their credit score so that they can get better interest rates in the future.
I'm not sure if you've seen this. I've seen a couple of articles on LinkedIn recently, and I think this is an approximation that 7 out of the 10 states that are growing fastest in clean energy are red states. Have you seen that?
I have not, but that doesn't surprise me. A lot of the other irony about your comments about the president pulling back on the Inflation Reduction Act and specific investments in clean energy, those studies have shown that the majority of those projects are happening in red states. So it's both red, it's the entire country is benefiting from the fast emerging clean energy economy. I think clean energy jobs was like what, the second fastest growing job sector in America? And Florida has been leading along that charge. We've been the 1 or 2 slot nationally with a booming industry. And I would also note that over 70% of Floridians support solar energy. And so it's, to me, it is such a no-brainer and such a missed opportunity that it's sad, candidly, at this point where we're seeing increasing heat waves, intensifying hurricanes. We're seeing a rising sea levels, whether you believe it or not, it's happening. We literally cannot stick our head in the sand here. We need to be providing real world solutions. And if we can do that cost effectively and benefit those vulnerable populations, grow our economy, and at the same time promote cleaner energy, why is that a difficult choice for us to make? It's not. And we need to have the political will, the leadership, and I would say in many cases, we need more knowledge. One of the things that always just drives me crazy when I think it was AOC who rolled out the Green Deal, we heard about this big sacrifice that we'd have to make. I'm like scratching my head. Can save people money by going on solar. It's not going to cost you more. I'm going to save you money. And in the process, we're going to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to reduce the likelihood of continuing heat waves and intensifying hurricanes. We're going to promote jobs and clean energy. Where exactly is this sacrifice? And the same thing, if I can just ramble on for a second, I just bought an electric vehicle and I bought a home charging unit that cost $400 and is the best performing car I've ever had. It cost me about 1/3 of filling up oil or gas at the gas pump. And it's more convenient because I wake up every morning fully charged and I can drive across the state and back on one charge. And again, I'm scratching my head. I'm like, this is the sacrifice. I'm fortunate to have had the ability to invest in these technologies. And that's the essence of this conversation. And what Self does is help knock down these financial and technological barriers that are precluding or preventing average Americans from investing in these technologies and taking advantage of the multitude of benefits that come from them.
Yeah, I could definitely echo your experience with the EV. I've been driving one for 5 years now, and I have a home charger, and it it's so convenient. And people are like, and it by far is the best car that I've ever driven in my life.
Right.
The performance outdoes an internal
Yeah.
combustion engine, bar none. Around town, I don't think that there's anything better. I drove my electric vehicle to St. Pete from Tallahassee to the conference, and uh, you need to plan out a little bit and think through. Okay, where am I? For me, from Tallahassee, I stop at Gainesville, and then I go to St. Pete, and then charge in St. Pete, stop in Gainesville, and go home. And it it's not that big of a deal, but the benefit of never having to go to a gas station, especially when I'm most of the time I'm at home and being able to plug it in at home and get a charge for about $5 versus $60
Yeah, exactly.
is
Exactly.
absolutely incredible. Yeah, it people who think that electric cars are a sacrifice have just never driven an electric car. That's just they're far superior, I think. So what is your hope over the next, say, 5 to 10 years in in energy policy and for America, how we view and how we transition?
I don't think the chaos that we're in right now is going to be the long-term future. We're the clean energy is already here. The technologies that are in hand now are already a great advancement, and we're going to continue to see innovation and lowering prices. Another example would be battery technology. We saw a huge uptick in demand for batteries after the hurricanes of the end of last season. I can't even keep them straight. There's so many. Helene and others that came through and knocked out power for an extended period of time. People are starting to use these technologies in new ways, not only to save money and go green, do the right thing, but we're starting to see the integration of batteries for energy independence and for what I would describe as energy resilience.
Right.
So it would make sense to not only put a solar system on your roof and integrate battery and hopefully an EV charging station as well to save money, but in the event of a catastrophe or a major storm that knocks out the power, you're going to have emergency base load power available to you while the grid is down. And this is a item that we've worked on for many years now. We had a partnership with Miami-Dade County. We secured a $200,000 grant from the Leon Lowenstein Foundation, and we gifted that essentially to Miami-Dade County, who then matched it. And then we took one of their public housing buildings that I think had maybe 80 or 90 low income elderly people living in this building. And we put solar on the roof, did an assessment of what their emergency baseload power needs would be, and then integrated batteries so that in the event of a storm, we would have the ability to run one of the elevators, we would have cooling rooms, we would have electricity available for medical devices, for medicines, for food, for the ability to plug in your iPhone and be able to access information or contact relatives. But it's a tool for emergency response and recovery. And this gets, I'm elaborating a little bit, maybe too much beyond where you need to go with this, but we also work a lot with people with disabilities. And I
Mhm.
took part in a national conversation about disasters and people with disabilities. And what struck me was the conversation started with how do we get vans lined up so that we can move everybody out to some centralized location? Having lived in Florida for decades, if there's a hurricane and it's a one, two, or three, the safest thing to do is to stay in your house. You're more
Mhm.
likely to die on the crazy roads than you are from the storm itself. So
Right.
you don't want people to have to move or drive anywhere unless they absolutely have to, like Andrew, a 4 or 5 that's coming. And instead of this mindset of everyone with a disability has to be put in a van and taken to some other location, if they were to use these technologies like we were just describing, they would have emergency baseload power available to them. They would not need to leave. They would not be inconvenienced. It would not be additional costs on them to have to relocate and pay for this and that. And it's safer and more convenient for them to stay. So I think the future is going to be a continuation of the innovation as well as the new application and use of those technologies as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. That future conversation is going to be a lot more about resiliency, and especially for those who rely on medical devices at home,
Right.
that it's almost not a environment question anymore. It's a safety and life preserving tool to have
Right.
solar plus storage. So you don't have to be put in a van and taken somewhere or wait.
And
So I think that is a really excellent point that you just
yeah,
made.
if I could just one last comment on that is if you do then take people by van and take them to a centralized location, you've now created, I don't like the word burden, but a huge responsibility and cost for local government,
Mhm.
nonprofits to have to be able to identify facilities, provide manpower at those facilities, provide food and beds and so forth. So it just seems to me the much smarter way for us to be dealing with these storms in the future, and it's a paradigm shift, honestly. It's just we're going to have to really continue to rethink the way we have traditionally done business. Not that we've done all these bad things. I'm not trying to suggest that, but there are better ways, more
Well, we learn.
efficient ways, smarter ways. And I think that's what the clean energy economy does give us new tools, new solutions, real world solutions that we should be deploying more widespread if the majority of people can access it. And that's where, again, the creation of the Solar Energy Loan Fund was if government is not going to be able to solve this, then we would like to be able to provide additional options. No one is mandated to do this. We're
Mhm.
just trying to provide options so that all Americans can participate and benefit from the fast emerging clean energy economy. And that's a big hurdle to jump in America. Half of Americans can't access money.
That's a good word. At the end of each podcast, I love to ask my guest if, Doug, you could go back before you started Self and you could tell yourself one thing, you only could tell yourself one thing. What would that one thing be?
Wow. Interesting question. I don't know. Well, I'm thinking of the very first time that I presented the idea of creating a solar energy loan fund. Before I went public as a idea, I brought in the top staff from the county to pitch the idea of creating the first local nonprofit green bank in America. And I got a lot of looks like they was going over their head. What is this guy talking about? And one of them turned to me and said, Commissioner, do you mind if we speak candidly with you? And I was like, oh, absolutely. Tell me what you're thinking. And the answer was, we think it would be a waste of time. Let that set in. And thank goodness I did not give up at that point because I felt deeply in my heart and in my brain that this was the right thing to do. And I simply politely asked them I respect your opinion, but please just do me a favor and stay out of my way because I want to go after these grant dollars. I think I can make this work. And then, of course, here we are 15 plus years later, and we've expanded from one county to 17 states in the District of Columbia and help more than 12,000 people, and we're just getting started. So I think that the message when I reflect back on our history is to believe in your dreams and don't give up, even if you've got naysayers that don't have the vision to see what you're seeing. Do not give up on your dreams.
Thank you so much. And thank you for what you do. And congratulations on all the positive impact that you had in Florida and now 17 states plus the District of Columbia. And as you expand to all 50 states, it's exciting
Thank you,
to
Mark. I
watch.
appreciate it. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the InNOLEvation Mindset Podcast powered by the Moran College of Entrepreneurship. Hey, if you like this episode, be sure to hit and share it with your friends and leave us a comment. We always love comments and we respond to every single one of them. And then be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another amazing episode. Thank you. We'll see you next time.